So what can a lady we don't really know, a train whistle, and a really kick-ass rock band teach us about gratitude? We're about to find out on this episode of the Gratitude Journal podcast. Welcome back to the channel. It's Matthew here, and I continue to try to figure out exactly what this channel is about. And I know that breaks all of the YouTube algorithm rules, but that's kind of the way it is with me lately. And I think partially it's like that way with me because I think it's just time for me to exert some honesty. And not that I haven't been honest before, but I feel like in some ways, in my attempt to try to figure out exactly what this is all supposed to be about, I've kind of missed the point in trying to figure out how to be honest. And I think this honesty takes its shape kind of by accident because I have to admit I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out what YouTube is all about. And what happens in that journey is that you watch an awful lot of people and you try to figure out if you're doing whatever you're doing is right. And that's been sort of a challenge for me. And you can really go in the rabbit hole on this. And sometimes going into the rabbit hole can be a learning experience, and sometimes going into the rabbit hole just sort of puts off the inevitable. I mean, while I'm riding my stationary bike, I look to my right and there's this guitar that sits there. And, you know, every couple of weeks I take a microfiber cloth and I wipe the top of the guitar off and the fretboard, knowing that I'm going to go yet another week without playing anything on this guitar. And, you know, my fingers are, you know, they're just soft. And so, you know, all the calluses that I had built up, you know, they're long gone. And so I kind of had this sort of moment of satori this past week in that, you know, at work during the day is this beautiful J45 Gibson acoustic that sits in a case and nobody plays it. And as you know, I work for a non-commercial public radio station, and part of my job is to film artists who come through and do live performance. And we've just had this real glut of emptiness in our performance space. Like, yeah, the tours are gearing up again, and the people who normally come by have not come by. So this, I think they just got this guitar in case, you know, like we have a musician who's maybe flying in, they don't want to travel with their own gear, or their gear was sent ahead to another performance space and they don't have anything to, you know, to play. And so we sort of had this guitar loaned to us. It's not just any guitar. I mean, it's a Gibson J45. I mean, the thing is pretty nice, but it's been sitting in this case. And so during the week at work, this past week, I've been trying to go in there like for 10 minutes and just try to get some semblance of fingering back onto the guitar and some semblance of getting these, you know, hands back into being a little bit calloused again. And my point in doing that is I think that we can put off the inevitable. And, you know, so someone on one of these 9,221 YouTube videos that I watch, you know, mention sooner or later, you got to stop watching YouTube videos and you actually have to create something. So this is Good Friday today, and not exactly sure what that means in my present state. And I'm sure, hardcore Roman Catholics will look at me and point their finger and say, no, you have to go to confession before Easter because, you admitted that, you don't know where that fits in your life. You should be somewhere later this afternoon at 3 o'clock because, it's the most important, the second most important day of the Christian calendar. And I know that, like intuitively. But I think going through this admitting to myself issue that I haven't been picking up the guitar and I have to remedy this, the fact that I've been feeling sort of guilty like all throughout Lent of just not being a very good Roman Catholic. And it's made me almost like fall into this hole. And I guess for want of a better word, I call it the honesty hole. This thing where I just really need to be honest with myself, and sometimes just being honest with yourself isn't enough. You kind of need to bounce it off folks. And it seems lately that I've had a lot less folks to bounce these things off of. And maybe that's partially my fault. Like, I don't really possess the skill to find the right words. And usually that's not a problem for me. I mean, I've spent, my whole life in front of these things, and you would think that I would have an amazing amount of dexterity, when it comes to figuring out how to say what I mean and mean what I say. But I've just had a lot of issues and a lot of problems doing that lately. And I feel like part of the problem is that I really haven't been honest. And, the honesty sort of manifests itself lately in a lot of sort of anxiety and depression and a combination of both. It's kind of like this stew that just, you mix in things and all of a sudden you have this kind of that kind of comes out of it. And that's really kind of the way I've felt. Just really feeling inept in my caregiving responsibilities and in a way sort of inept at my job, not really performing at the highest levels. And I've just been really struggling lately to figure out where gratitude comes into play because, man, oh man, between trying to be a patient caregiver and trying to operate at a high level and trying to produce content. I mean, you see the last video that I've done, and I was reminded that I haven't really done an irregular podcast throughout 2024, even though our granddaughter Megan gave me this great t-shirt. It said podcast host, and I have it kind of draped over the chair in my studio. I just really haven't been very vigilant about podcasting. I've not been very vigilant about playing the guitar and learning new things. I've not been very, very vigilant in trying to figure out where spirituality plays a role in my life. And there just seems like a lot of winds are blowing in a bunch of different directions. And that doesn't even include all the stuff politically that has caused a lot of butterflies, in my stomach. So I feel like there's just been a real need for me to be honest both to myself and to the people around me. And I just really feel like I need help. And so rather than just laying that out there and saying goodbye, I thought that I would try to figure out where gratitude fits into this, because that's really the whole point. It's been the whole point of the audio podcast, and it's been the whole point of me trying to have this manifest itself in some way in video form. And, as I've watched all the YouTube gurus, I need to either be doing something educational or something informational or something entertainment related. And lately, I've just kind of looked at that guitar and my life here on Good Friday, and I don't feel like I'm hitting any of those categories. But then I had a sort of I guess a little bit of a moment of ding, like a bell went off, and I'm reminded of this situation back in the fall where Donna had some issue, which I won't go into, and it required us to go to the emergency room. And we went to the main emergency room 10 minutes down that way, and it was just packed. I mean, it was a Friday night. Usually I play pickleball on Friday night, and so I was pissed because, I didn't get to play pickleball. And I was more worried about her because she was in a lot of pain. And so we went to this emergency room, and like they were doing construction on the emergency room. And like there were, plastic sheathing up everywhere and like construction people. And, they had like these mazes of people wading through to finally get to the front desk. And there were probably like 20 people ahead of us. And I thought, this is just nightmarish. And it ended up being nightmarish. I mean, it was like an 11-hour visit to the emergency room, and you're sitting in these locations and you're packed in like sardines, and then she's in pain, kind of rocking back and forth, and I'm missing pickleball, and it's just it's just a bad ordeal all the way around. And so they finally like took her back to this like pre-exam sort of waiting room, and they told me to stay where I was. And so I was sitting there, and I noticed this woman. She was in there too. She couldn't walk. She had like this really enormous leg problem, but she was kind of waiting for someone that she had called to show up at the ER. And as I was kind of sitting there, kind of rocking back and forth myself, because I do feel like I'm a little bit OCD anyway, and always have been, even as a kid. I felt these eyes kind of looking at me. And so I kind of looked up and over at her, and, she was holding her leg, waiting for her person to come and sit with her. And she looked at me and she said, "You're really worried about her, aren't you?" And sometimes I remember that exchange. It was just such a small, almost seemingly minuscule exchange. And amongst all the chaos and amongst all of the disarray, construction and crowded people, and I forgot our masks, and it was just ugly and yucky, and I had no idea how long we were going to be there, and I didn't know that we were going to get home at 5:30 the next morning. But it was just like a tidal wave of chaos. And somewhere along the line, her just asking that, like out of pure empathy and compassion, it sort of lightened my load, at least at the time. And so sometimes amidst this chaos and feeling down and feeling helpless, really, because that's pretty much the way I've been feeling lately, is just pretty helpless. I felt like the honesty part was admitting to myself, like, that's the way I feel. And amongst that admission, I felt like a small little like glimmer, like I was open to this glimmer of whatever that was that she gave me, this little injection of empathy. And it reminded me that I have to try to do the same thing, like be aware of the people around me and the things around me, and not just focus on myself, because as you know, we all can get like hyper focused on ourselves, and we just really lose sight of the other person and the other people around us. And I think that was a pretty big lesson for me. I just feel like amidst everything that we're going through, and they never stop. I mean, we got back from this trip to Las Vegas, and I've just been dreading this trip. I'm dreading it from trying to manipulate, all of the people that I wanted to see in one place, and making sure, that Donna was safe, like in the airport, and just watching out for her, and just being mindful of time, and knowing we had long layovers, and it was just traveling at weird times. And I don't know, I just like have a lot of intestinal difficulties anyway. And then when you're traveling, if you feel the same way or you're experiencing the same thing, you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of ugly. Trying to, sorry, but trying to like be regular and it upsets the whole apple cart. Like everything is just like topsy turvy. And I knew it was going to be topsy turvy because that's generally the way it happens for me anyway. But I felt like this trip was just like a necessary thing to, visit people and have people come together and come across some relatives that we had never met. And, all in a very, very busy city and growing like crazy. I mean, Las Vegas is just unbelievable in 2025. And it's only getting bigger and, expanding with more growth. And this was a very pivotal time, I think, for us to like take this trip. And I felt it was like necessary and it ended up being okay. But I think when I got home, and I'm one of these people, like when I come home from a trip, I have to unpack immediately. Some people just like throw their bags in the corner and they get their beverage. I'm so glad to be home. I can't do that. Already in my head, as we're, taking the shuttle from the airport over to where we have the car parked, I'm already thinking, okay, if we get home in X amount of time, I can start a load of laundry and I can get everything together. That's sort of the way my brain thinks. And I know it's a little OCD, I suppose. I don't even know if I'm using the word OCD correctly or, the terminology correctly, but that's the way I feel. And I think like once we were all situated and settled down, I was still scanning the whole house. Like, did I turn that off or should I turn that back on? Or is the security alarm set? Or did I hear the dryer just go? It's almost like while we were watching the streaming thing, I thought I heard something in the distance. Like it was like maybe like somebody pounding on the back door or something. And so I grabbed the remote and I hit pause on the remote. And what I actually was hearing was this train whistle. Like we have a train track right at the bottom of our hill. And Donna and I both love trains and like the whistles of trains. And so I paused, whatever we were watching was on exceedingly loudly. And I paused it, and all of a sudden, like in 2 seconds, just this melodic, gentle, almost like non-panic inducing hum tone in the distance from this whistle just like reverberated throughout the evening. And it just like gave me this incredible sense of calm. And we both looked at each other and almost together we said, train whistle. And that just like was a salve. Like it was just soothing. It just like mowed me over, like took the anxiety of everything involving this trip and just sort of set it aside just for like a brief moment. And I'm just really grateful for that stupid train whistle. I just feel like sometimes you have to find like the whistle somewhere out there and I don't know, I guess just like be open to what that means. Like I think that, maybe it's like looking for a sign, but I think it's more like being open for a way to kind of like, sure, meditation can do that. Zazen can do that. But sometimes it can't do that. And I know theoretically what it's meant for. Sometimes a train whistle is just maybe the salve that you need. So anxiety filled, feeling helpless, feeling hopeless, deep in a hole, sometimes. Okay, yes, this looks different because it is different. One of those little things that you never really think is going to happen, and it does, like when your battery runs out and you realize that on your Sony ZV-E10, you really only have one battery, and you don't have a dummy battery to plug in. In other words, I had to switch cameras, so that's why this looks different, and I apologize for that. So my one final thought for today about honesty and feeling yuck and reaching out to tell all of you that that's the way I'm feeling. And it has to do with this band that I've been listening to lately. I love Mama. I just think every groove is just so great. And I wrote an article for the radio station website with whom I'm affiliated. And I wrote about this last week on why distortion and just loud, grungy sounds have always played a role in my music listening habits. I mean, I like all kinds of music, everything from, some classical to, some jazz and a whole bunch of things in between. But I just will always favor, a plugged in stack of Marshall amps set to 11. And that's just something that I always love. And this band Mama, I mean, if you haven't heard them, they're amazing and I love them. And sometimes when I've been feeling like just not great, I just throw one of their songs on and it just puts a smile on my face. In fact, I'm thinking about them right now, and I'm going to run over to whatever I'm using, a turntable or whatever it is, and I'm going to put some Mama on this Good Friday. And that will make it a Good Friday. I know I wasn't supposed to say that as a Roman Catholic, but I did, okay? So sue me. Anyway, I just want to thank you for tuning in and watching this channel. I'm trying to get it off the ground. I'm still trying to learn my way. For the audio podcast listeners, I'm trying something different today, using the audio as a new podcast episode, because I was scolded that why do you never put up new episodes? And so I'm trying to rectify that in some way, shape, or form. So be open to the train whistle. And if you don't hear it, put some Mama on. I think you'll love it. Thanks for tuning in to the Gratitude Journal.